In today's show, we're talking best fits, biggest swings, and more for the Trailblazers in the 2025 NBA Draft. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen. Coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. So make it a part of your daily routine. Make it your first listen. Tell your friends to do the same. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's show, we're talking Trailblazers in the NBA Draft, and I'm going to share with you who I think are the best fits, just kind of who would be, if you're drafting specifically for need, who would Blazers' best fits would be, the biggest swings. If you're looking for upside only, who do you take the biggest swings on? And then my least favorite fits. Some of this is my own personal draft philosophy, and some of this is perhaps siding with the research that I've done a little bit. We will get into all of that in today's program. Let's start with best fits, though. Thinking of best fits, I might say best fit, but what I really mean here is like, what are the Blazers team needs? I think they have a couple, right? I think they could use some more shot creation, like somebody you could say like, here, go score when we need it. I don't think they don't have a ton of that on the team, and if they kind of lean into their the youthful lineup, slightly younger group, they have even less of it. Certainly, there's players that could develop into that. I hope Shaedon Sharpe continues to develop as a self-creator, and he's been there to varying degrees. Sometimes very good, sometimes not so good. Scoot Anderson has probably more to show in that area, although he hasn't shown it yet. Obviously, Deni Avdija took a big step in that direction this year. But I think creation is a big need. I also think shooting is an obvious need. If they don't really change much, like if Anthony Simons is back and Jeremy Grant is back, like obviously those are like probably the Blazers' two best shooters, both like in theory and in practice. Although Jeremy Grant didn't shoot great last year, but he wasn't terrible. He shot north of 36%. But they don't have a lot of ways to put out like a bunch of shooting lineups, or even like a lineup that features like multiple above average shooters. So when I'm looking at the draft, like projecting for self-creation is pretty hard. But I think if you're just looking at like shooters who could do a little bit more than shoot, I think these are kind of the names that I land on. And granted, the Blazers are picking 11, and some of the names I'm going to throw out here are not going to be on the board at 11. But if I'm thinking like in the, let's assume Cooper Flagg is absolutely not available. Let's assume that it's fairly unlikely Dylan Harper is available. Anyone below the top two, I'm kind of thinking in that tier, although like best fit, like Flagg would really help. I think Dylan Harper would be a really interesting piece to add just because of the size and the he's like a big guard, and I think that'd be pretty intriguing for what the sort of Blazers are building. But the names I've come up with here kind of fit that shooting with a little bit more type of profile. The first one is Trey Johnson from from Texas. He's a dude who shoots, I think maybe more than a shooter at this point. He's gonna get him up. He's gonna try to get a bucket, right? Some of that is probably the nature of his role on his particular Texas team. Some of that is the type of player he is. He's a dude who's going to shoot it. He ranks pretty highly on the sort of self-created threes in terms of points per possession on self-created threes relative to his draft class. He's a guy who can score off the bounce from distance, and I think that is something the Blazers could really use. They don't just need three-point shooting, but they could use just like kind of basic shooters, like either a guy you could park in the corner or a guy you could bring off a screen hard and like get a shot off a hard cut. They could use both of that, but they also kind of just need like someone who's scary from a little bit further out that brings a little bit of a gravity, that brings that sort of natural spacing and natural gravity from defenses. And I think Trey Johnson fits that. The other names that are like, another name that I think quietly fits this isn't going to be available at 11, but is like doing more research on the draft. I first heard this on Locked On NBA Big Board in April, but I dug into this a little bit more and quietly, Ace Bailey is like a really good catch and shoot 3-point shooter. The problem is he doesn't really fancy himself as that. He's like, from what I've seen him, he fancies himself like a dude who gets into his shots off the dribble and takes hard jumpers because he's a capable, tough shot maker. Like that's how he views himself, like a shot creator who's going to get to mid-range pull-ups and get to fadeaways and get to challenging shots because he can create for himself. And he is like 6'10" with an intriguing handle for sure. And so maybe if you could convince him that he's not that or that's not his primary tool, I do think quietly Ace Bailey really profiles as a pretty interesting shooter. He shot 38.7% on catch and shoot threes, 36 of 93 per synergy. That's pretty darn good. That's Trey Johnson was up above 40% on catch and shoots, so like by that same service. So like he's not the best of the best, but like Bailey with that shooting, he also rates pretty darn well as scoring as a cutter and an offensive rebounder. What if he's an off-ball play finisher type? Like what if Bailey's being pushed as this like primary guy, and what he is like more of that like intriguing role player who does stuff. He's like Michael Porter Jr. if he knew how to dribble type of thing. Like I think that might actually be closer to what his best version of himself is. It's like he might not view himself as like gap-filling role player who can really shoot it, so maybe you don't ever get that out of him, but I think that's intriguing, and maybe if you're talking just like best fit, that version of Ace Bailey is really intriguing to me, because you get the size, he's 6'10", you get the shooting ability, plus the other tantalizing stuff that if it does fill out in terms of his ability to create his own shot, then you have a real interesting player. I would bet Bailey goes 3 and Trey Johnson goes 5 based on the mocks. But if they're there at 11, that is certainly like that gets you into the category of best fit. If the Blazers could just like pick their guy, those two seem to be like really fit the really address a specific need on the current roster as it is currently constructed here at the end of May. The other name that may be there at 11, but I don't know, is Con Knippel from Duke. It seems like he's going to be a top 10 pick based on the mocks, but if you are in that sort of 7, 8, 9 range, which I think you see Knippel maybe mocked as high as like 5, and then he's like maybe in that 5 to 10-ish range on most mock drafts. I would say that's his like most typical range. If you're there, obviously it only takes one dude. Like if you were going to go 10th, it only takes one dude to creep up into the lottery and be like, wow, I can't believe Cedric Coward went that high. So like, Knippel could be on the board for sure. He's reasonable, but like 6'5", he doesn't have long arms. Maybe doesn't fit the Blazers like MO of like big rangy athlete, but he can shoot. I think he's strong enough to be a driver at the next level. I think his defense, while he's never going to be a lockdown defender, I think it was kind of fine in college. Obviously he's playing behind like two pretty awesome defensive players and Malawach and Flag, but like I think Knippel has the like shooting and then attacking closeouts type of skill set the Blazers could really use. I think he's an interesting person for best fit. So I mentioned some guys that are probably like too high, like in Johnson and Bailey, like they just like won't be available. I think they'll be too high up on the draft order, but for guys who are maybe it would be a slight reach at 11, two more that are sort of the best fit fill a need types. Jace Richardson from Michigan State. He's like a 6-foot combo guard. He's slightly, he's a little taller than 6 feet barefoot, just under 6'1". He's not, he would not be the profile of player I would go after, but hyper efficient creator who can shoot catch and shoots and maybe have some off the dribble game and like, like he's a pure shooter, and I think that is a fits a need. And then Rasheer Fleming, he didn't shoot well his first 2 years, right? He didn't shoot well as a freshman. He didn't shoot well as a sophomore, but then his junior year, he shot 39% from 3, and he is like a big 4 who might even be able to sneak some small ball 5, depending on how he fills out, and maybe can shoot. Like, I think he's more 5 than 3, although like you hope that he can guard 3s. In terms of skill set, I think he's more 5 than 3. But like size-wise, he's probably certainly more 3 than 5. It happens. But like he's a stretchy 4, shot 39% from 3. Is it a small sample size and we're getting caught up in one really good collegiate season, or is it proof that he progressed from year to year and got better? I think Fleming is, for me, probably a reach at 11, but I do like him as a first-round pick. Like I think he has an intriguing skill set. And if you're talking about just best fit, it's like a 4 who he doesn't rebound particularly well defensively, or did not in college. So that's maybe not an ideal fit, but for what the Blazers need, because they desperately don't want another the sort of Jeremy Grant's fill-in. They want a four who can grab rebounds, but a shooting four with some defensive upside. I think Fleming is intriguing, Richardson is intriguing, Knipple, Bailey, and Johnson. If you're just talking about best fit, I think that's probably it. Certainly some of you have other opinions. I support you to do that. Again, like I said at the top of the show, this is sort of my own personal bias mixed with some research I've done about these draft guys. But always, like, this time of year, like I'm not going to be able to avoid my own personal bias, so I'm just going to lean into it. Let's talk about biggest swings. If the Blazers just take a swing for biggest upside, who could be targets at 11 if they're just swinging to hit the deepest moonshot home run possible? Join me on that second segment. We'll talk about biggest swings. First, though, let's talk Wayfair. The days are getting longer, the weather's warming up, and people are spending more time outside, which means it's the perfect time to refresh your outdoor space. Whether you're working with a big backyard or you're working with just a small little balcony, Wayfair has everything you need to make it feel more like you. Wayfair's massive selection of outdoor essentials makes it easy to transform any space into your ideal summer setup. From comfy conversation sets to sleek dining tables and outdoor decor, they've got it all, and at prices that fit your budget. We are slowly transforming our backyard, and finding comfortable places to sit and the right type of furniture can be a little bit tricky, but Wayfair has a super easy to navigate website with so many selections. So we were able to, or at least have the ability to, find stuff that matches our vibe without spending a fortune. Plus, at Wayfair, if you're looking for stuff, delivery's always going to be free and hassle-free, even on the big stuff. So whether you're entertaining guests or relaxing solo, shop Wayfair to help you unwind. There's a huge selection of outdoor furniture online at Wayfair. This summer, get outside with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. All right. So, what if the Blazers don't go best fit, right? They don't draft for need, right? They don't say, this is a team that desperately needs shooting and we just need to be able to put more shooters on the court. What if they say, our philosophy here is to hit a home run, is we're going to take the biggest swing possible, knowing that we might strike out, but we want to draft the player with the biggest the most upside imaginable. I think there's 4 names I kind of have here in that category. Let's start with Carter Bryant. Forward from Arizona, played a year in college, didn't have a big minute role, didn't have a hyper productive role, but just looks like an NBA player, right? He's an NBA forward size. He has the athleticism. It's the shooting, at least in theory, looks like it could be something real for him, and I think all of that bodes well if you're just upside hunting. Like, if you're looking for a player who is just under 6'7", barefoot, and shot 37% from three on 100 attempts in college, it's not a tiny little number by any means. He took three threes a game, basically. The majority of his shots came from outside the arc. He took about five attempts a night, and 3 of them came from 3. That's where he was living, right? And he has this athletic profile to be 6'7" wing who can shoot. It's just, we haven't seen a ton of production from him, and when you are hoping for a guy like him to rise, there are a lot of bumps along the way. How much can he do on offense? He looks like a pretty darn good defensive prospect. How real is that? How much does that translate when you are moving to a role where it's can you be a primary stopper as opposed to oh yeah, pretty good defensive player, right? There are so many places along the way, but in terms of frame, age, because he's on the younger side for this draft class, frame, age, and athleticism, Carter Bryant seems like a pretty big swing, and why he is jumping up draft boards from a guy that was probably a first round pick, no problem, to he's going to go 8th or whatever, is because if you're projecting tools and frame, that's exactly what it is. And that's kind of everybody in this category. The next name on my list for biggest swings is Noah Senge. The appeal with the Senge is that he's super young, and he's really long, a really long defender who's super young and has been productive at the professional levels despite having some warts, which is the type of upside swing that you take on a guy. You say, like, he's been able to be productive, but he can't shoot. He's been, one of the better players on a team that's, still competing into the playoffs. But he can't really dribble. He has holes in his game, and he is, one of the younger guys in the draft. Again, physical tools, the right type of physical frame, tools and frame is what you're drafting for here. But like the bumps along the way, like, is he just going to be like a pretty good defensive player who doesn't, is he like a fun version of Al-Farouq Aminu or something like that, right? Which obviously is certainly a risk. Al-Farouq Aminu was the 8th pick in the NBA draft. Asenge is the type of player who, if the shooting does come along and if he develops his handle and the playmaking a little bit and the sort of offensive, all of his offensive tools are just a little sharper, and the defensive playmaking, same with Bryant, is a shot blocker, defensive playmaker. Asenge, like the defensive playmaking can translate to the league. All of a sudden, like, he has the upside to be very, very good, right? Because he fits the physical profile of that multi-positional defensive wing who could maybe add a little bit off the bounce. And that's what everybody's looking for, is like playmaking, ball in hand type of wings that can guard multiple positions. That's ideal, right? You're not going to find it with everyone, but that's your next upside swing, is first Carter Bryant, now Noah Asenge. And then the next one, a little bit outside of this exact profile, but I'll go here next, is Yegor Demin. He just is so big and skilled that if the shooting comes around, like the actual can this dude score comes around, you're just not probably going to find people his physical size with the skill set he has, right? Probably the best passer in the draft, the best playmaker in the draft at 6'9". It's pretty good. The shooting is maybe, it leaves a little bit to be desired, and how aggressive is he getting to the rim and getting his own offense, and does the sort of some of his athleticism challenges make him like who does he guard type of thing. But at 6'9", you can almost always fake it, right? You can almost always fake it, even if they want you in the dance for it. They pick on you in pick and rolls every time. You're 6'9", like you're just going to be big and in the way. It's so much easier to fake it when you are that frame, and skills at that frame. Yegor, it might not come together for him, right? He may never be able to shoot enough for it to matter, and he takes a bunch of threes. He might not ever be able to be aggressive enough to get himself to the rim and be a guy who lives at the free throw line and be like, if you're going to be a ball in your hand type of creator, you need to be able to score, because you have to keep defenses honest, right? You cannot just dribble the ball around for 18 seconds of the shot clock and try to pass. That's not how it works in the modern NBA. If you're going to be someone who they give the ball to, you have to be aggressive looking for your own offense, because you have to create advantages by being aggressive. And if that clicks for Demin, like, just the sheer size and skill set alone is not going to come around a lot of prospects. And that in and of itself is intriguing. The last guy is someone who's just shooting up draft boards, and beloved here on this particular program because he went to Willamette. Go Bearcats! But Cedric Howard, who matriculated from D3 and then most recently played at Washington State. He has the upside to be a really interesting part. If you are just taking a big swing, Coward might be a home run. He also might just be a dude who played 6 collegiate games and looks the part. Like, he, spent a bunch of time injured last year, and because there isn't a lot of tape on him doing stuff, that always helps. Limited info is sometimes like really intriguing this time of year. So you go back and say, like, well, we can, you don't have 34 games. You don't have 41 games to pull from. You don't have, you don't have as many bad games or bad moments in good games to pull from. And then people get excited. And I think he's shooting up draft boards. And, admittedly, he was awesome in his second season at Eastern Washington before he transferred to Washington State. And that's when he only played 6 games last year in the beloved West Coast Conference. I was about to call it the Pac-12. But, he was a hyper efficient scorer in the Big Sky at Eastern Washington. But, at Washington State, even with the tiny little sample size, it's like 17-7 and shot 40% from 3 on 5 attempts per game, which is like, pretty decent volume. It's not crazy volume. It's 8.5 per 100 possessions, but like that's pretty good volume and pretty good accuracy. Obviously not a ton of games. Plus he has the physical profile. Like he's not gigantic, measured just over 6'5", barefoot, but like looks like super long arms, right? 7'2" wingspan in that frame at 215 pounds. I think there are so many outcomes where Cedric Coward is just a dude, where he's just a dude with like good physical measurables. But if it all pops, the athleticism, the shooting, the long frame to be a really, really disruptive defender, that length, strength, shooting combo, again, that is what the multi-positional ability to get your own shot type of wing. That's the coveted position, and he is that. Those are my biggest swings. Let's talk to close the show about my least favorite fits. These aren't even necessarily bad players. I just have like a draft philosophy about how the Blazers should approach this, and none of these guys fit into the plan as I see it. Join me in that third segment. We'll talk about my least favorite fits for the Blazers. All right, still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond. You still listen to Locked On Blazers. Let's talk about my least favorite fits for the Blazers in the draft. So, part of the challenge in thinking about what the Blazers need and what, and why I don't think there's like someone who just like jumps off the page at 11. This is the absolute guy who's likely to be there. Go get him. Like, and you obviously people have their own preferences, but for me, I don't like see someone every time. It's like you talk yourself into like, oh, Carter Bryant would be interesting. Cedric Coward would be interesting. Is that too high for him? Yegor Demin. What if he can't shoot? Like all of even the biggest swing guys, it's like they're not perfect. Rasheer Fleming, it's like Is he what is his floor? Is he like a low level role player? It's easy to talk yourself out of anyone who would be at 11. It's easy to talk yourself into some of these guys too, right? Because there seems like there's a lot of dudes who hit like not even their 90th percentile upside, but something like their 70th percentile upside, and they're for sure an NBA player. And if at 11, you're trying to draft a quality rotation player that hopefully is a starter, like your goal is to draft a sort of like your fourth or fifth starter, I think is like a reasonable hope here. Like if you get it right, obviously you can draft freaking Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, but like a reasonable outcome is like, this is at 11, you get your fourth starter, and that player plays on your team for a decade. Awesome. Nailed it. Super awesome draft, right? But obviously there's some big hits in there along the way. You might end up with Klay Thompson. But thinking about the Blazers and their needs, right? The roster's kind of full. And they got young players at every position. Scoot Anderson, it's like you want to see more of Scoot, right? You want to see, like, even if you don't think Scoot's going to be very good, the Blazers owe it to like the process to kind of give Scoot runway to find out that he's not good. If they find out that he's really good, awesome. Then you go from there and you've got a good basketball team. But like they kind of owe it to themselves to give him that runway. I would say same with Shaedon Sharpe. He got a bunch of minutes this year, but you don't want to have him have a lesser role. Toumani Camara, Denny Avdia, those dudes look like they need to play because they are good basketball players. You don't really want to be like, okay, we got to prioritize this 19-year-old we drafted, right? Donovan Clingan is not going to be someone who plays 35 minutes a night at any point, but you still don't necessarily want to crowd that position, although I do think you need center depth, which is kind of a contradictory thing to what I'm about to say. When I'm thinking about my least favorite fits, recognizing all those youngsters, plus DeAndre Ayton still on the team, Anthony Simon still on the team, Jeremy Grant still on the team. They've got, not only do they have young players, they have young veterans. Jeremy Grant's a little bit older, but like Ant and DA and Ayton are like young veterans, right? There's like 26-year-olds. These aren't ancient, right? Young veterans behind them, plus some other parts. If you're curious, like, oh, what's Chris Murray and what's Ryan Rupert going to be? So when I'm thinking about best fits, I'm thinking about like, okay, the roster is a little bit crowded, but you can always use more wings. In part, you can always use more wings because the Blazers have shown a comfort with essentially playing Toumani Camara at what is effectively shooting guard. He might play another position on offense, but it's like because he's capable of guarding guards, they put two other forwards on the court with him all the time. and play a ton of minutes with him next to Jeremy Grant and Denny Avdia. They're comfortable playing him at what is functionally the 2. I think it means they really don't have a 2 in there, but it's like big wings, a point guard and a center. They also, if you draft another wing and they're really good, you can mess around and see what small ball looks like and see if you can get away with playing an all wing lineup. Like you can always find a 6'6" to 6'9" dude who can score and defend. You can figure out how to get that player on the court. That's not an issue, right? Like if they multi-positional defenders. So like wings, I'm not any player who's like functionally a 2-3-4, I'm not really worried about that. Point guard is a little bit different because you have Scoot Henderson, and like I said, you kind of want him to play, but I don't think Scoot has been so good in his first 2 years that should be worried about drafting a really good point guard if he's there. I think like your mileage may vary on Jeremiah Fears. If you like him, right on. If you're worried about the finishing around the rim, also that's fine too. He reclassified, was one of the youngest guys in the draft class. You think like young players get better at finishing, and he's really good at getting to the rim. So maybe you can talk yourself into him. If they were Blazers were in a different spot, I think Dylan Harper would be a no-brainer type of thing. So point guard's fine. I'm not too worried about that. I don't love, and what I'm going to tell you about all these guys is the sort of center types, because I don't think you can find a bunch of consistent minutes next to, for most of these guys, next to Donovan Clingan, such that you could play a super big lineup. Just because I think the defense wouldn't hold up, and I think the offense with sort of typically lack of shooting would also be a problem. And I don't think using another lottery pick on someone who you hope ends up playing half the game is just a good use of resources. It's not like a terrible plan necessarily. And I think, like, again, this is my personal draft philosophy. Yours may be different, but for me, the guys, my least favorite fits are all the sort of centers, all the guys who are mostly 5s. Kaman Malawach, I think he might be pretty good. I know he didn't test great at the combine, but I've watched him play. I bet he'll be a pretty good NBA player. I don't love him because he's like a true 5, and it just doesn't seem right for the Blazers in this current spot in terms of my least favorite fits. This is not necessarily a comment on Malawach as an overall prospect, but a prospect in the context of the Portland Trail Blazers roster. And you could throw Derek Queen in there too. I love Derek Queen. He's my type of player. Smack talking, face up big man who can really pass, the highly skilled, kind of ball hoggy big man who can pass a little bit when he wants to. That is my type of player, right? He's a fun player. I do not like his fit on the Portland Trail Blazers. I'm worried about how he could guard 4s. I don't think he's maybe big enough to be a rim protector and play center a bunch. I like him, and whatever team he plays for, I will probably enjoy watching him, but in terms of like fit on this team, not for me. The next 2 are probably maybe a little bit reaches at 11, but I think are worth mentioning. I'm not really an Asa Newell believer. I think he's a tweener. I think he's caught in between. I think he's the build of a power forward and the skill set of a 5, and he's just going to have to get so much stronger to play the 5. Or you say, oh, we can play the 4 because he has the athleticism to do all these things. But he doesn't have the offensive game to like be a 4. He doesn't do anything off the dribble. He doesn't shoot. It's like, I think he is a power forward size, center skilled, and he's not like the hyper talented where I can talk myself into him, like in terms of just like fun skill stuff like Queen. He's a project, right? He's a guy who might turn into being a really good player, but for me, not my favorite fit. And the last one, I don't think he'll be, I think 11 is probably too high, although I do know some people like him, is Thomas Sorber from Georgetown. Fun defensive player, might end up being a pretty effective pro, but for me, the non-shooting big on the Blazers seems like a bad call. It just seems like a bad call. If that's not what fits the rest of their team. It's like I don't think a perfect pick and roll partner with Denny Avdia is a non-shooter. I don't think a good pick and roll partner with Scoot Henderson is a non-shooter. I don't think a front court partner next to Donovan Clingan is as a non-shooter is like tenable. So, and also like you just really need to be very fleet of foot to play next to him as well. So it's like, okay, if they're just a backup, do they fit well with the starters in case you need to plug them in? Not great. And if you're dreaming of playing 2 bigs together or sliding with these guys down to the Malawach is a true 5, but these other guys maybe he's like sliding them down to the 4. It's like, that doesn't fit either. And if you have, for me, that's the challenge here, is that I would be against the Blazers drafting a center type with the current roster. Obviously, if you draft a center type and then you make other decisions around the rest of the roster that make it make sense, and you say like, hey, look, center depth is always going to be super valuable. Having multiple types of big men that can play has been like very obviously useful in the playoffs. Like look at, you look at the Western Conference Finals and the flavors of bigs that both Minnesota and Oklahoma City can roll out really allows them to mix and match and play different shapes. I'm not against center depth. I'm against using on this specific team, using the 11th pick, this resource on adding a center based on the current roster. If the roster changes, I would be fine with it in a hurry. And quite frankly, like some of these players, like Malawach and Queen, I think are pretty good. So like I wouldn't, in another context, I might be like, nice, that's a really good choice. But I'm trying to do this with fits and context within the Blazers. That is going to do it for today's program. Fun stuff for you the rest of the week. We'll continue with our season reviews for the final 3 players on the Blazers roster, plus an interview for a first-time guest coming on the show later this week, although it's not confirmed when it is, so I'm not going to tell you who it is, but hopefully we will get that nailed down and I'll be able to tease it for you on tomorrow's program. Speaking of which, come back tomorrow. It's what we do 5 days a week, wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.